Let's talk more about market sentiment. Joining us now as our guest host for the next hour, Jim Rogers, chairman of Rogers Holdings, joins us in our SGX studios. Jim, always good to have you on the show with us. Risk is back on the table. Are you buying?
Well, I bought some Japan yesterday and last week, and so I was delighted to see that you pushed it up today. So keep doing it. Keep doing it.
We didn't push it up, but what exactly are you buying in Japan?
Well, I bought the index. Mainly I bought the index, and I bought one little farming-oriented stock. But I do own the yen, and the yen's down today. So you didn't do me any favors today by pushing down the yen. But I own the yen, and I own more Japanese stocks as of this week, last week.
It's interesting you say you're buying the yen, because there's all this talk about joining.
I'm buying the stocks. Not buying the yen.
Okay.
I own the yen, though.
Okay, you own the yen. Yeah. What sort of forecast are you making in terms of the supply chains disruption we're seeing over in Japan right now? I mean, clearly the nuclear situation is still not over. We are watching developments. Automakers, the chip makers, they're still feeling some delays when it comes to production. Are you worried that this could, be something that companies in Japan could be slummed by?
No, of course, it's going to cause a slowdown in the Japanese economy. If you get hit by the worst earthquake in 100 years, of course you get hurt. And it will. Eventually, though, they're going to have to rebuild, or they will rebuild, and it's going to cause a big surge in the Japanese economy and a big surge in demand for many, many things. So I don't think Japan is going to fall off the face of the earth. In the meantime, I own Japan.
Did you just jump in, Jim, on a valuation ground? Was it just a trade, you looked at values and decided to look over a course of a time frame, 2 years, that's cheap?
Well, Ross, I was actually contemplating buying Japan anyway, and then all of a sudden it got hit with the earthquake, and there's been a collapse. It's been my experience that when there's some kind of exogenous event like this and markets collapse, you're usually better off stepping in and buying. It doesn't always work, but most of the time you wind up looking much better in 6 months to a year, because the world doesn't come to an end and things do survive, especially a country like Japan. It's one of the largest creditor nations in the world. It's not going to disappear. It doesn't always work, but most of the time it does. So it's pure and simple, just experience, buy disaster when you can.
Are you buying the market as a whole, Jim, or certain stocks?
Well, I mainly bought the index, just because it's easier that way, and I'm lazy and slothful and, pathetic. So I mainly bought the index. I did buy one little agricultural-oriented stock, but mainly the index.
If we do get more downside for the Japanese market, would you be buying more, or would you be thinking of holding back your positions a little bit? I mean, how would you see the Japanese market?
If it goes down 50%, I'll be trying to survive. But if it goes back down, yes, I hope I'm smart enough to buy more. We don't know how this thing is going to wind up with the nuclear power plant. The market's going through the roof, but the headlines are it's still a disaster. It looks like the market usually knows more than the headlines.
So if you're buying Japan, what are you selling these days?
I'm not selling anything. No, I'm not selling. I'm waiting to sell short U.S. government bonds, long-term government bonds, but they have another 3 or 4 points to go up, I would suspect, before I would short them anyway. So I plan to short government bonds.
When it comes to U.S. debt, there's a lot of talk that when it comes to repatriation, there's a lot of things that Japan can do. Perhaps maybe sell its U.S. debt holdings to try and repatriate some of the money back home to try and pay for the rebuilding process. Is that something that could hurt the overall U.S. debt market, you think, or is it going to be very minimal?
Well, Christine, I said I'm waiting to sell short U.S. government bonds. That might be one reason. And one reason I haven't sold my yen is because, yes, it seems to me the Japanese are going to have to bring money home. One way to do that is to sell U.S. government. I don't know how they're going to do it, but they could sell U.S. government bonds, turn the dollars back into yen. The yen would continue to go up, and bonds would go down. Now, that's great sitting here in this studio saying that. Let's see if it works. That doesn't make it work.
Are you manipulating the markets?
Yeah, I wish it were that easy.
Oh, okay, all right.
I wish it were that easy.
Jim Rogers is going to continue staying with us as our guest host for the next half an hour or so. Of course, Ross, as you heard, he's going to be looking at ways to sell U.S. debt. Remember, you can email us your questions for our guest, Jim Rogers. The address worldwide at cnbc.com. I'll be checking that email, Ross, to see if any questions are coming through.
Well, we normally generate a few. Now, I'm a bit concerned because Jim normally, you see, he likes to have a big English breakfast when he's here in the morning, but of course it's evening time there. So what have we fed him?
We don't have an English breakfast, but I can tell you we gave him a nice packet of Snicker bars. No, Mars bars. Was it Snicker bars or Mars bars?
Snicker bars.
Snicker bars. And he's had a couple already?
Yeah, a couple. More than a couple.
I'm pleased your diet's
money's worth.
pleased your diet's going well, Jim. That's good to know.
Jim, what's your reaction? Obviously, in this nuclear situation, really questions, the viability of nuclear power. Does that somehow increase the stakes up for investing in alternative energy, like, for instance, natural gas or some of the other fuels? I mean, how would you play this whole changing energy landscape?
Well, for a while, it's going to increase the demand for natural gas and oil because nuclear energy is under a cloud, and people are suspicious of it. What I think is going to happen, it's going to be that way for a year or two or 5, but eventually we need nuclear power. We need something to replace oil and gas and coal. We need to replace coal. People are going to come up with much safer nuclear power plants, and then we'll start over again, I would suspect. That's normally the way these things work. Unless we can find something else to replace oil and gas, we got to have nuclear, whether we like it or not.
So in the meantime, what does this do for the oil price? We've already seen oil prices shoot about $100 a barrel. How much higher does it go from here? What are you betting on?
Well, the price of oil is going to go much higher, Christine, over the next decade. The world is running out of known reserves of oil. That's why we need something to replace oil and gas. We need nuclear, whether we like it or not. If we're not going to have nuclear, then the price of oil is going to go to... You pick the number. It's going to go beyond even my wildest dreams, and I'm bullish.
I pick the number. I usually pick the numbers.
Oh, come on, this is CNBC. You're supposed to watch CNBC. You always have people on CNBC.
CNBC asks people like you what the number is going to be, and then you tell me the number. Not the other way around.
You don't have people like me. You have, all those people who know. I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Okay, Jim Rogers doesn't know where the price of oil is going to be at. So remember, if you have a question for our guest host, Jim Rogers, you know what to do, Ross. Send him our way. Worldwide at cnbc.com.
I think we've got a couple of questions, actually, Jim, that we wanted to get to you as well. You were talking about nuclear, you think is going to come back. Is there going to be a trading case, Jim, for uranium or not at some point in the future?
Yes, I've actually been watching to see what's been going on with uranium, and as you know, it collapsed. Ross, usually these things take a few years to sort themselves out, so I'm not rushing in to buy. I'm not very good at short-term trading anyway. But if after a year or 2 or 3 things have calmed down a bit and Japan survives, I would suspect that uranium and or the nuclear power stocks are going to be great buys again. They've certainly gotten beaten down now. TEPCO's down 80%. I was stunned. So, yeah, they're going to be great opportunities, but I'm not thinking about stepping in and buying. I'm just watching.
Keep those emails coming. Jim is raring to go to answer your questions. He's sitting right here with all his nickel.